If there's no new business, then we'll be on to citizens' opportunity.
Okay. Our first speaker is Denny Nail.
Thank you, members of the council, mayor, everybody else here tonight. I'm a business owner near the homeless group between Madison and Monroe at 504 Fayette Street, okay? That's where my office building is. I've been there since 1998, and I'm dealing with these issues with that encampment, which is owned by the state of Illinois, okay? And since April 1st through the present date, I've had 7 different items damaged in my building that I've had to repair at various times. I had a deck behind my back, on the back of my building. I've had to put a permanent gate up there. I've had air conditioning units tampered with. I've had electrical units being used. I've had to cap off all of my electrical outlets. I've had an out faucet capped off. I've even had to put in lights in the back of my building for security purposes to try to prevent damage in the evenings at night. And it has been an absolute daily event for my office and my staff, okay?
Yes, sir.
Last week, we even had a rat run across the parking lot, a large rat. So it's becoming even more important about the issues on this site. And once again, it's owned by the state. And the city can't do anything about it currently. That's why this ordinance is extremely important, to permit the city to address a lot of these issues with the homeless situation. I'm sympathetic to the issue that people have. I'm not totally cold about that. But when you get into a situation like this, the Journal Star on June 17th, this J.J. Bullock published an article and interviewed Glenn Giles, who was sort of the poster child of that group at that time, okay? And he interviewed him, and he said, Glenn talked to the Journal Star, said this is a wonderful place, it's so comfortable, everybody takes care of everybody, there's no drugs, very little alcohol use in this encampment, and that hit the newspaper, and immediately within 2 or 3 days, that encampment grew by about 20 people, okay? On July 17th, a month later, Glenn Giles was arrested on that property by the City of Peoria Police Department for drug paraphernalia, drug usage, and failure to appear in another jurisdiction on a warrant for his arrest, okay? And he was the poster child for this. And he himself had said, there's no drugs, no problems with this encampment area, and he himself was arrested, okay? And his rap sheet, I won't even go into it because it's very extensive, okay? On May 7th of this year, I can see all of this from my building. I have a 2-story brownstone building on Fayette Street. Many of you may know where it is, okay? And on May 7th, I've got a picture of a drug deal during the middle of the day. I've got the car, I've got the license plate, I've got a picture of the people that are doing it. I'm not turning it over to anybody, but this is not drug-free or alcohol-free area, okay? I have a dumpster outside that I share with the women's club that I provide for them when they have events there. That dumpster is totally full every week from homeless people dumping their garbage in there. I have to call GFL, who is a subject tonight of some discussion earlier. And so it's become quite a nightmare for my office, okay? We also have had to call the police numerous times. I've attached some police reports with some of the information I provided the city tonight, to council members, and I've provided to other people as well. There was a fight going on. A man was coming after 2 women on the site. He was arrested for aggravated battery. There was a warrant out for his arrest in DuPage County. The police arrested him, took him to jail, and sent him back up to DuPage County, okay? We also have had to call the fire department at times for campfires, for lack of a better term. They're taking the branches off the trees and starting fires and doing some cooking. Trillium, who is the old Fayette companies on the corner, they've called the police in because they have parking there in that lot, and they're being harassed at times by some of the homeless people there. So it's become an issue that not only is personal to me, but also it's something that we need to deal with finally. And this ordinance, the U.S. Supreme Court came down, said it's possible, it's not cruel and unusual punishment to implement things and do the stair step of fines and so forth, and ultimately jail. No one has any interest in putting any of these individuals in jail. That's not the purpose. But, you have to have, when you're dealing with this, and I've dealt with it over the past few years, it's not been as great. It's something that evolves, and now it's become a real crisis in this city. And the people, we're trying in this city to get people to come back downtown to work, right? And we also want businesses to stay downtown and develop this area, okay? There's been subject matter tonight of various businesses and so forth. And we want to we want the people to live downtown. The warehouse district is doing well. We're trying to get that going, trying to get other people to move downtown. I'll be quick.
Time's up.
And then we also have people visiting our city. And you've seen that. Look at the Ronald McDonald House. The people that come there and share that property, come into town, out of town, they're looking at this. It makes us look ridiculous. So I think it's time for us to really step forward and act and do something worthwhile and get it done. Enough talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Estrella Diaz.
I promise I'm not going to take up too much of your time. Basically, what I want to say is I have two things that I wanted to bring up about, the ordinance of the encampments. I feel as though, I respect a lot what you had to say, Madam Mayor, what Bernice Gordon Young had to say, what Mike Vespa had to say. I'll pick that up in a bit. What Mike Vespa had to say and what Riggenbach had to say, because literally, if we are to, if we are to just go in this headstrong, it's kind of like if you're gonna clean your room and you just sweep everything under your bed. It's not really, you're not cleaning up them. You're not cleaning it up. You're not finding any solutions, but you're delaying the problems. You're not fixing anything. So with the approach that you guys are taking, I think it's a good approach because you're slowly doing it, and it's not such a drastic change. Yes, we want it to change, but it has to be a slow progress to doing it. I understand there are complaints and stuff, but these are people too. It could be any one of us that ends up homeless. You don't know, life happens, stuff happens, and your life can change within an instant. So we need to have I understand this has been an ongoing issue, but we need to be a little bit more empathetic because at the end of the day, they are people as well. They're people. And now, going into my next part, I'm still here to advocate for a ceasefire, and I feel like the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm still going to be here to remind you guys that, we still want that to happen. I mean, you see some of the group members, we're all wearing red to signify why we're here and what we're here for. But from Peoria to Palestine, we're just here to, be for human rights. And that's why we're speaking up about Palestine. And most of us are in favor of what you guys are doing of not criminalizing homeless people, because it's not it's not their choice to even be out there, but they don't have anywhere to go. But that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Christine Call.
Good evening. Thank you very much for, the conversation that happened earlier around the proposed ordinance. Thank you for the ongoing support that we do get from the city to address the homeless issues. I think one of the things that we lose sight of, however, is that the problem is growing at a faster rate than we have been putting solutions out there. There was a comment made, I think by the city attorney, about needing another tool. I urge you to consider other tools. Rather than punishment, including an aggressive plan to develop more affordable housing units is a call to action. In the proposed ordinance, the fifth whereas comment down refers to considerable expense. And the amount that was cited to clean out the encampments is roughly $31,000. That would only support 3 housing units over the course of a year at the current fair market rent. So I think we need to understand that housing also has a significant cost, and that there are a significant number of households that simply do not have the resources to pay for housing in our market at this time. Another comment in there was the cost referred to the emergency response. I went through each of those calls, and I just want to point out that 68% of the calls that were on that list were for medical services. I think it's important to understand that medical services get addressed regardless of your address. So even if those same individuals that were on the receiving end of a medical related emergency response call had a fixed address, we wouldn't be sitting here and saying that that was an inappropriate use of city resources. So you need to focus on just a handful of them that were around mostly the fire issues in the encampment. The other thing is that the Downtown Development Corporation has done a really good job of developing appropriate housing, largely in the warehouse district in downtown. And there's a report that is published by the DDC every 2 years that talks about the need for housing to meet the higher income households in our community. Where in that report does it talk about what is the unmet need for lower income households? If we were putting affordable housing units online at the same pace that we are putting higher market rental online, we would be solving this problem at a much faster rate than we have done. Again, those are incentives, not punishment. One of the other things that was in the background for the reference was that it does talk about that the city participates with the social service agencies and other agencies in a very wide network. I think it's important to understand, just because a network exists does not mean that it has the capacity to address this. An example I'm going to point out to you is that there are only 1.5 staff supported by a grant specifically to do homeless outreach. And that grant covers 4 counties. So street outreach by only 1.5 people is not at capacity to meet the unmet need for unsheltered in our community. Our unsheltered number has ticked up every year in a report that is filed with HUD. In last year, or January 24 number, was over a 40% increase from the prior year in the unsheltered count. So again, I think the issue here is to talk about what other tools can we put in the tool belt. I had some stats on here that I will also submit written around the disproportionate impact of homelessness on African Americans in our community, the disproportionate impact of the lack of affordable housing on low-income households. Those are information sources that I pulled out of your report, your consolidated plan that the city of Peoria generates themselves. And in it, it talks about the strategic plan that the city went through a very lengthy process. And out of your top 5 priorities, they're around this exact issue. Substandard housing and affordable housing are your priorities 1 and 2. And your 4th priority was homeless services. So let's talk about the priorities to address, or the solutions to address those priorities that you yourself and your residents outlined as a call to action. A couple of examples of some actions that I think: 1, delay implementation of this ordinance. I think that's a very straightforward call to action. I know that it's only on the first reading, but I feel there was no time given to interview the social service providers, the continuum of care network, the consumers who live on our streets and are impacted by this decision. I've been working in this environment for 20 years in this city, and I have to tell you, I was shocked that it took you 46 days to get an ordinance out on the table in response to a Supreme Court ruling. Nothing that we have done in 20 years took only 46 days to make it before this group. So I think, again, it's just coming fast. Let's hold off, please. Do some more research, do some more interviewing from the people who are impacted directly by this. The second one is to explore
Your
innovations.
time's up, Christine.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, that's fine. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Jonathan Volta.
An exceptional amount of things I'd like to say tonight. I'll try to be as quick as possible, but I'm going to use all 5 minutes. I apologize. First of all, ceasefire now. I'd love to say a lot more about that, but strapped for time. There were a lot of things said tonight. One of the most frustrating things I heard said was that Denise Jackson has her finger on the pulse of her constituents. I am one of your constituents, and I don't dislike you, but I did not vote for you because I didn't have the opportunity to. The districts were redrawn. Chuck Graham was my representative some time ago, and now, without an election, Denise Jackson is my representative. The gentleman who said that, I wanted to have a word with him. I think he's gone now. But it's very frustrating to hear someone act as if there's a monolith representing, to act as if anything is monolithic in this city. Denise Jackson, you do not have the pulse, your finger on the pulse of your constituents. And I don't think any of you do. On the subject of the housing crisis and the homeless. There's a book by Jane Jacobs called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. It should, I think, be required reading for a municipal representative. It goes into great detail the deterioration of our neighborhoods on many levels. The housing crisis in America is the everything crisis. It contributes to climate change. It contributes to obviously unhoused individuals. It contributes to inflation. One of the things that makes inflation so strong, it moves so quickly because of energy consumption, like oil and coal and et cetera, getting very expensive, but it stays where it's at because housing prices, they don't deflate. Eggs, as you brought up, they came back in price. Consumer goods like that can quickly change. Housing prices do not quickly change if they change downward ever. They almost never do. And it's clear to me by many of the subjects tonight that you don't represent Peorians, you represent property-owning Peorians. There, in a book called Golden Gates that details the housing crisis in San Francisco, a terribly interesting idea is brought up about how an individual a decade and a half ago started attending planning and zoning commission meetings and speaking up on housing development projects in behalf of the residents that don't exist yet, who don't know about the meeting, who can't show up, to tell them that they would love for that complex of 400 units to get developed, but there's a single family housing development of citizens who say, no, we just don't want it we don't want that in our neighborhood. So I am here to tell you that there's people who are not homeowners, who benefit from many of the decisions that you make, many of the decisions you have made tonight and every night, who will never be able to be here because they don't know you're making this decision. They don't know that they will get to benefit. In the case of businesses, as it was brought up, there are many people who would patronize certain businesses, but they won't get to be here to tell you that. But there are a handful of residents in one of the only large apartment complexes with commercial use. Somehow they aren't cool with commercial use in one of the only places you can choose to do that. I'm rambling and I'm sorry. I wish I had prepared a little better. But the point being, this city, as someone else, as you mentioned, has grown substantially in size and barely in population, and there's an ineffable amount of reasons for that, and I would love to talk at length about that with all of you. And so what with the last 50 seconds of my time going to say is that I feel as though I should develop some personal relationships with all you. So I'll be emailing you, and I'll be giving you some homework, some articles, things like that, because the housing crisis is so complex, and it cannot be solved with punitive measures. I firmly stand against any criminalizing actions in doing so. And I want to, the first gentleman who spoke said, no one wants to put these people in prison. But that's what the ordinance would do, isn't it? If you don't want that, then why do you support the thing that does that? And last time I was here, I focused on the word hypocrisy. And I don't know.
Your time's up.
Thank you.
Aaron Slaughter.
Hey, good evening. I'm fortunate I get to work with the unhoused here in Peoria and Tazewell County. I never spoke, never did nothing like this here before, but like criminalizing, like That's just wrong. It ain't right. You gotta have a solution. These are people, they're not animals. All right? That coming up with a solution, coming up with something. What's wrong with getting a piece of land? Moving an encampment to the land, linking all the things that it's already together, bridging them together. All the services are out there. There's a lot of solutions. I'm not going to hold everybody on hostage, man, but they're not animals. They need a solution. Jail is not it. What they say? They said 3 citations in 180 days and then 6 months up to jail. I can't even see none of these programs getting nobody done in 180 days. And I've been out here a couple years on these streets working.
Christopher Short.
So when I first came to Peoria a few years ago, I remember talking to somebody and I said, I made a comment. I said, if the homeless were to leave a trail of flowers wherever they went, then everyone would say, "Yay, here come the homeless." But that's not the case, right? But after every event, Super Bowl, whatever, we leave plenty of trash where we go. So I don't know that that's behaviors that's living like an animal, so to speak, but I think I would call it lack of resources, a lack of knowledge with behavioral health. I have the honor to say that I was a part of the homeless community when I came here a few years ago. It wasn't because of the choice I made. It was just, it was during the COVID crisis. I kind of was down on my luck, went through divorce, kind of lost everything. A lot of us, we have our own story. Who are we to really even give our opinions or our assumptions without knowing personally what that's like, that experience is, until you have gotten close enough to see and unveil the truth of people's lives? I mean, who are we to try to change things that people have fought for to get the rights and where we are today? Who are we to change that? And I remember being a part of this group called the OJC, it was Orphan for Justice. We did the stats on orphans, right? So we found the stats. It was if one family out of every 3 full church congregations, one family, just a single couple, would adopt one child in the United States, it would actually solve the orphan problem. So we decided it was a church problem. I feel like this is our city, right? We represent this city. We are all here trying to live the American dream, right? The White House, the picket fence. But the truth is, we are all undoubtedly, we're family, right? We are all in this together. So this is a city problem. This is something that we need to come up with. And I feel like every time we come up with these strategies where we appoint, we get people sitting around a table and we come up with ideas and we start appointing people and then we get grants and the money goes up. But where does the money go? I've been here for a few years, and what I've seen 2 women do with a few loaves of bread and with filled hearts, Lula, I'm speaking for Lula, what I've seen them do, they've left a legacy in the city in the last few years that rocked me to the core, that made me want more for myself. They introduced me to harm reduction and made me realize that I deserve my medical, I deserve housing, I deserve to have the same thing that everyone that has the 9-to-5 life that pays taxes. And now because of that, I own property here. Now I pay my taxes. I have a mortgage. I made it because of that. And I want the same for others, but there's so many different variables to them that come together with this. It's a single person with the wrong mindset that's in the wrong position, that has a position of power or entitlement. They can change the whole world for one individual. One person that's sitting behind a desk that needs to make one signature because they have a bad attitude or the way they look at things. They could ruin that, and that affects people. And every individual they don't want to be where they're at. I didn't want to be where I was at, but I guess what I'm saying is we're so quick to try to come up with plans, but there's already been a plan in place. We've already filled the hotels. We've already housed people, but there's people already doing the things that we want to point and we want to pour money into and start these ideas, right? But it's already happening. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to cure this. I feel like we just have to want more for our city. We have to be involved. We have to take this personal, right? If you don't like driving by and seeing encampments by the highway when you take exit to go to your 9-to-5 a job or go back home, be a part, be an answer to that, be a cure for what you think is a sickness to our city. We all play a part here. Let's get our hands dirty. That's how we do it. And now in the last few years, not only do I work and I have the home, but now I work with the same people that helped save my life. And there's no greater honor. I mean, I just encourage you guys don't be so quick to come up with a new plan when it's already happening. Just be involved, be more in tune. And there's a lot of people that just based off maybe different ideas that they conflict with each other. We have a couple organizations that are already in this. I don't want to name any names that you guys are giving a substantial amount of money to. And they kind of prevent some of the workers that are out in the streets every day working with the homeless.
Up, sir.
All right, thank you.
Keshe Bernard.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. Let me start by telling you what I'm not here to do. I'm not here to virtue signal to potential voter bases for a mayoral candidacy run. I'm not here to prove my moral superiority. I'm not a politician trying to excite constituents with deep pockets or political clout to throw a public fit like a petulant child while calling other people immature for being passionate about this issue. I'm not here to pull political power trips either. Instead, I stand before you today as Executive Director of Jolt Harm Reduction and a concerned citizen to express my strong opposition to any proposed ordinance that would criminalize homelessness and outdoor camping in this city. This ordinance, which follows this recent Supreme Court ruling of Grants Pass, Oregon, is not just a misguided policy, it is a dangerous step backwards, one that betrays the core values of many on this council have historically championed. This ordinance is in direct opposition to those values. By criminalizing homelessness, we are not solving the problem. We are merely punishing those who are already struggling the most. We are turning our backs on the principles of compassion, unity, equity, and justice that should define the way we treat the most vulnerable in our community. Moreover, it is important to recognize that the context in which the Supreme Court's ruling on Grant Pass was made. This ruling was handed down by a far-right conservative Supreme Court, a court that was strategically shaped by the GOP to entrench their power and roll back the progress we have made as a nation. This court does not represent the values of inclusion, fairness, and social justice that many of us and you hold dear. To align Peoria's policies with a ruling from this court is to side with an agenda that seeks to preserve inequality and maintain the status quo at the expense of the most vulnerable. We must also consider the troubling history of Grant Pass itself. Grants Pass was a sundown town, a place where Black Americans and other people of color were not welcomed after dark. Oregon, the state in which Grants Pass is located, is often regarded as the whitest state in the country, and this is no accident. Oregon's laws and policies have historically been designed to exclude people of color, and this legacy continues to shape the state's demographics to this very day. To follow the example of Grants Pass in Peoria is to invoke the spirit of the sundown towns, a spirit that sought to erase and exclude those who do not fit a narrow, discriminatory vision of society. In Peoria, we must be better than this. We must recognize the racial disparities that exist in housing and in our unhoused populations. People of color, particularly Black Americans, are disproportionately represented among those who experience homelessness. This is not a coincidence. It is the result of decades of systemic racism in housing, employment, and criminal justice. And by criminalizing homelessness, we are perpetuating this racial injustice and effectively reinstating the exclusionary practices that characterize sundown towns. So instead of criminalizing those who are already struggling, I urge this council to consider alternative, humane strategies to addressing homelessness in Peoria. Continue to invest in affordable housing. Prioritize the creation and preservation of affordable housing options, including rent control. Housing is a basic human right, and ensuring that everyone has a safe place to live should be our primary goal. But until we can have that happen, we must be compassionate with our response. Continue to expand supportive services, increasing access and reduce barriers to mental health care, substance use treatment, case management, and job training programs. I hear all the time that Peoria is resource rich, but accessing these resources are a nightmare. I have better luck transporting people out of our town to access these resources than actually accessing the resources that are available here. 3, expand the housing first approach. This is evidence-based strategy. It provides permanent housing without preconditions, and it has been proven to reduce homelessness effectively. Strengthen partnerships with local organizations. Many local organizations, including Phoenix, Jolt, OSF Street Medicine, Lula Peoria, and our local shelters and continuum of care, all who are already doing critical work to support people experiencing homelessness, but especially talk to those who are actually unsheltered. The city should strengthen partnerships with these organizations, providing them with the resources and support they need to expand their impact. In conclusion, this proposed ordinance is not the answer. When someone is forced to do something, they lose their power of choice. So let's stop saying they have a choice. It will only lead to more suffering and will further entrench the very problem that it seeks to solve. Supporting this ordinance would be a betrayal of the values we claim to uphold, values of justice, compassion, and equality. So I ask you to reject this ordinance and instead embrace strategies that treat our homeless neighbors with the dignity, respect, and support they deserve. And together, we can create a Peoria where everyone has a place to call home and one where people are more important than profit. And that's what will make Peoria skyrocket. Thank you.
Okay, Cachet Bernard.
Yes, I don't know if this is allowed, but I brought photographs to show our council people about what happens when people sleep outside with no shelter, no tents, no anything. You can see this gentleman's toes are black. They're black from frostbite. I'm not going to bore you with the details of the financial cost to OSF where he was eventually transported, but the cost is real. This is a resident of Peoria. This is one of your citizens that, Chuck, you referred to as an animal. He deserved better. My name is Casey Bernard. I am a co-founder of Lula and outreach supervisor of Jolt Harm Reduction. We work closely with other social service agencies, including OSF Community Faith Outreach Nursing Programs. I'm sorry, I'm also very sick tonight. Phoenix Housing, Sophia's Kitchen, Dream Center, Pathway Ministries, and the Salvation Army. I am very lucky to provide direct care and services to our most underserved and most vulnerable citizens. Once again, you know the ones Chuck referred to as animals. I have the great honor and privilege to know their names and their stories. You were right, Councilwoman Young. Their stories will bring you to your knees, and they deserve to be heard by everyone in here before we make decisions that criminalize them or dehumanize them. It is important to know I have lived experience. My father was killed in a parking lot. His death certificate read homeless. My mother and I reap those consequences. His name was Wilford Swan. I could tell the story of a young boy who aged out of foster care. His name was Tyler Smith. He was failed by every system the city claims to have robust services in. I welcome any of you to come meet with me over coffee and hear their stories and the failures that they faced that ultimately led to their death alone in an alley. I could tell you the stories of John, Kenneth, Haley, and many more who were barred from shelters. They mattered. We failed them. You all failed them. We have 414 unsheltered citizens and only 348 beds. Of 291 adults, we only have 264 beds. We have 123 unsheltered children. We have an 84-bed capacity. This does not reflect the domestic violence shelters. Where do they go? The last page of the Peoria Fire Department lists camp issues in 2023. 28 out of those 31 incidents were for health. 2 were for shelters, or 2 were for fires at shelters. This tells me they need support and health care, not punishment. You guys have also said that you will hold their property. I am present most of the time when the city clears camp. Getting that property back, getting all of that property back in good condition is a nightmare. It is one I cannot navigate with all the resources, all the support of the people in the city who actually care. But you're going to put the burden on our people who have nothing to retrieve their property. It has been an epic failure to date. Lula unapologetically distributes tents, sleeping bags, trash bags, shelf-stable food to people with no other options or resources. They are under bans or there are simply no beds. It is a complex and multifaceted issue. They can't be in tents. They can't be in empty houses that the city has a surplus of. The cost is real. They are real. They are citizens and people who deserve more from the city that they call home, even though they don't currently have a home. They are Peoria. I beseech you all to do better.
John Kittinger.
And I definitely oppose this. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. It's simple as that. That goes in anything. All right. Also, I mean, what I don't understand is who came up with this ordinance. Whoever came up with it, I feel like this. If any of you think that getting rid of the homeless is, the city's gonna be lovey-dovey, you're living in a fantasy world, and you better get out of it, or you're gonna die and burn. That's just as simple as that. I mean, have you ever even stopped and talked to someone that's homeless? Have you said, "Hey, bro, you went down? How you doing?" Probably not. I don't know. I don't know none of you. You don't know. You didn't, and you don't know me. But like I say, I definitely oppose to it. You're either going to be a part of the solution or a part of the problem. I'm going to be part of the solution for myself, and maybe some of my other brothers and sisters, if I can help them. You know, I got a job. I'm still trying to get off the streets. I still struggle. You know, I don't make, $20 an hour, $50, whatever. I make barely minimum wage. But it's all a struggle, man. It just ain't about all drugs. It ain't about alcohol. People like that. If you can't relate to my situation if you ain't never been in it. If you ain't never been homeless, you can't relate to none of us, man. None. But if you said, hey, we all got ideas and solutions, have you ever stopped and asked us? Probably not. I ain't never. Like I say, I ain't never seen none of you. This is the first time I ever been here. But, man, but that's all I got to say.
Tara Wood.
Good evening. My name is Tara Wood, and I'm reading a statement prepared by my friend Mary Staple, a highly respected internal medicine and pediatrics physician in Peoria and part of a team of doctors and nurses who have conducted street medicine in Peoria. She wishes to be here but had a prior engagement. Dr. Staple's opinions do not necessarily express or reflect the views of her employer. She writes the following: I wish to make a response to the proposed ordinance that would prohibit unauthorized camping on public property within the city of Peoria. As someone who does work in the space of care for those struggling with housing insecurity, there are several reasons that I would submit that this decision, if passed, would work greatly against the overall public good and would certainly work against the good of this disadvantaged population. I want to clarify that this ordinance would not be necessary if instead we were making proposals to provide sanctioned or authorized encampments, or even better, if we were working towards further long-term solutions to provide permanent and supportive housing for those in our community who need these services. In that case, we would indeed reduce any costs tied to encampments and abatement, and we would be more meaningfully committing any funds toward permanent solutions for reducing homelessness in our region. In the absence of those more beneficial solutions being put forward, I will provide evidence demonstrating the benefit, to leaving encampments intact and the increased cost to society and the community when disallowing these temporary housing solutions. A 2022 statement paper from National Healthcare for the Homeless Council provides a comprehensive view of damages done by the removing or prohibiting of encampments. This article demonstrates that sweeps or removals of encampments damages health and connections to care, compromises personal safety and civic trust, and undermines paths toward housing and financial stability. Prohibiting unauthorized camping would lead to further unnecessary costs to the community. This ordinance does not provide a solution for those struggling with homelessness, and those struggling with homelessness will not just disappear. They will still need somewhere to go, and all these actions will do is worsen trauma and mental health conditions, sever connections to care, and undermine trust in current service providers. This ordinance would end in an increase in arrests and assaults on encampment residents, as evident in the data. These actions have also been shown to contribute to increases in drug overdoses as access to substance use treatment is disrupted. These actions have also been shown to push those struggling with homelessness into more dangerous and isolated environments. This can cause a real increase in morbidity and mortality for this population, also driving up healthcare and ER costs. These actions have been correlated with increased hostile interactions with police. The inability to have a sanctioned or safe place to be drives an increase in likelihood of incarceration, driving up those costs to society as well. We must realize that these actions also disproportionately impact racial minorities as well as those with disabilities. It contributes to unhealthy stigma and communicates a message promoting structural racism to our community. Actions tied to this ordinance would greatly undermine paths toward permanent housing and financial stability. Many vital records are lost with a lack of sustainable place to be. Criminal records are created, fines that cannot be paid, and employment often cannot be attained for all of these reasons. All of this further severs a person's connection to community. I want to emphasize this last point. Evidence shows significant cost increases to communities in enforcing these types of ordinances. Costs to healthcare systems and the criminal justice system are the main costs that taxpayers will face. And most sadly, it diverts our attention from focusing monies on affordable permanent housing solutions that would save all of us money in the long run. Dr. Staple concludes with this personal statement. As a mom of 6 kids, not me, her, I would just ask that we all remember the values and morals we seek to teach our children from the youngest age. As a person of faith, I teach them the importance of the golden rule. It is the basics of life, the loving of people that will lead our community down a better path. Let's focus on how we can do that and put our resources there instead of in ordinances like this that will not meaningfully help or serve our friends and neighbors. She ends with a quote from Father Gregory Boyle. The ultimate measure of health in any community might well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what folks have to carry, rather than in judgment of how they carry it. I'll conclude with my own comment. I want to remind us that the horseshoe is only one table, and I think the table some of you are talking about being at, and rightly so, is one that includes the voices of not just council members and the neighbors who see the unhoused as, quote, a blight, but those experiencing homelessness, as Dr. Gordon Young and Riggenbach rightly alluded to. This table also includes organizations interacting with the unhoused, as well as the experts and leaders who have created and implemented real comprehensive and strategic plans, like you said, Madam Mayor. Okay, thank you.
Tamara Smith.
Okay. I have no GED or high school diploma nor driver's license. And most of the jobs today, that's what it takes. So if, we can find something that, the homeless community can do, maybe that would help.
Jessica McGee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jessica McGee. I am the co-founder of Lula Not-for-Profit, a nonprofit that was founded in the beginning of the COVID pandemic in 2020 to serve those who live on the street. I have many friends and loved ones who are or have previously been part of the unsheltered community in Peoria, some of whom are here tonight. I am also a full-time business owner and employer, and my business helps to support my family. I mention this because as a business owner in Peoria who relies on my income to meet my monthly household expenses and to pay my employees, I also understand the challenges of having a business in a neighborhood where many people are struggling and unhoused, who might struggle with mental illness and/or substance use disorders and can sometimes be chaotic. My business is located in an area where unhoused people used to gather publicly. This made it easy for outreach workers to find them and to help them access resources such as food, housing, harm reduction, etc. Our primary goal was and has always been to see our friends on the street safe and with access to the resources to access better and healthier living conditions. Making sure that they know about available shelters and access to housing opportunities has always been part of our work. A tent is a last resort and one that we always hope will only be needed until more stable housing can be acquired. When our unhoused friends were no longer able to gather publicly in the area where my business currently is, unhoused people did not stop gathering. Homelessness did not go away. They just became harder for us to find. And it's at this point that I want to address the syringes and the public urination and the fecal matter that has been brought up several times as being part of the problem with homeless encampments. There's not a single visible encampment inside of my business, yet I find syringes, fecal matter, and urine puddles right outside my Peoria business door on a regular basis, and I mean literally at my door. I also have a rat or two by my back door, and my housed neighbors have filled my dumpster without permission until I had to pay extra to lock it. I get it, it's frustrating. But these problems aren't exclusive to people who are near homeless encampments. They exist throughout the city. And as someone who did regular neighborhood cleanups when unhoused folks were far more visible in the area where my business is, as well as now when they aren't, I can tell you that I have cleaned up more needles and human fecal matter in the past year than I did in the entire 11-year period between 2009 and 2020, when I had a different business in the same location and was an active outreach worker, and when unhoused folks were far more visible in this particular area. When we can't find people and when we can't see them, we can't help them. We can't refer them to resources. We can't provide a support system for them to lean on as they move towards better living conditions. We can't talk to them about proper needle disposal, how to get on a housing list, where they might find a bathroom that they are allowed to use, and how to access treatment and medical care. There are currently 3 small areas where folks are sleeping outside within a mile of my business, and I guess most people don't know or complain about them because they are well hidden. In finding and visiting each of these areas for the first time this week, it is clear that the residents could benefit from a support system and access to services. The neighborhood could benefit from them having access to these services. The business community could benefit from them having access to these services. But if they are criminalized for being visible, then they will stay in the shadows, where they will remain unhoused and without access to services that can not only benefit the individual, but for all of us as their neighbors. Thank you.
Nakota Facker.
Hi. I won't take up too much of your time because I know there are a lot of people that want to speak. My name is Nakota Olson. I'm currently an emergency department nurse, and I also have spent the last 2 years volunteering with Lula and Jolt Harm Reduction. I am here today to speak against an ordinance that would prohibit unauthorized camping and any ordinance that would further criminalize people who are unhoused. Through my experience with Lula, I have seen the chaos that happens when an encampment is disbanded. I have been asked the question not only as an outreach worker, but as a nurse in the emergency department at 3 a.m. when people have missed shelter check-ins, where do I go? Where do you tell them to go on a cold December night? I am here to speak about the lack of humanity it is to displace a person from the only space that they can call home. That's it.
Seth Major. Seth.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. Thanks for hearing us out tonight and for beginning this conversation in our city. I'm a resident of the North Valley neighborhood, and our church also gathers in the North Valley neighborhood. And we have taken steps over the last 4 years to increase our proximity with the unhoused population. Many of the people who are served by Jolt Harm Reduction and Phoenix and other entities that are represented here. We have also taken the time to learn and encourage others to learn as well. 2 years ago, we hosted a series of 3 town hall meetings at our facility that were well publicized around the issues of homelessness. And Councilman Allen went to one of them. And that's it. There are entities like ours, a small church of 30 people with an annual budget of $65,000 that are trying to make a real difference. Over the last year, we've increased our capacity to host Jolt and our neighbors into our facility, welcoming them with open arms to receive showers and fresh clothing, to be connected to resources, to have that safe place to be in order to meet with people from Phoenix, in order to meet with people from Jolt Harm Reduction, in order to meet with people from the city, like Nicole, the housing coordinator. And what I want to encourage this council to do is to try to do what a little itty-bitty church in the North Valley has tried to do over the last 4 years. And that is balance authority with responsibility. In pastoral ministry, I've learned over the years that doing the right thing the wrong way is the wrong thing. I've learned that the ends should not always justify the means. Peoria should be a haven for compassionate behavior. Peoria should be a haven for opportunities for people to be treated like humans. This council, as I look around this room, absolutely has been creative in so many other ways. When I think about empty hotels, when I think about empty city or county-owned facilities, when I think about St. Augustine on Spring, there is absolutely no lack of room. There is no lack of facilities that are scaled for housing. What lacks throughout the city is a compassionate impulse that is willing to give someone something that you maybe feel like they haven't earned. But if we can get over that, we're going to see a lot more people helped. Thank you.
Nicholas Hall.
Hi, how's it going? So I wanted to speak about my prepared remarks tonight, but following some comments by Mr. Grab, I wanted to address you directly. I am your constituent, and our neighbors who live on the streets, who live in tents, who live in the woods, they're your neighbors too, and many of them live in your district. The comments that you made tonight are deeply offensive, and it's confusing to me because I remember not but a few weeks ago we had a similar conversation about this very ordinance where you told me there was no plan for the city to go through and put in some ordinance that criminalizes and punishes homeless people. And I keep racking my brain asking myself what changed, and I'm sure that people behind me could speculate what that reason is. But I'm not going to speculate tonight. All I'm going to ask for you to do today is to take the time and sit down with your neighbors who are unhoused. Take the time and sit down with the service providers and work on a solution to the problem that you're so concerned about. You know, earlier you made a comment calling our unhoused neighbors animals. And I noticed later on you were so offended at the idea of a raccoon being thrown into a garbage disposal, but you showed more anger and frustration at that than you have shown any compassion that you have shown for our unhoused neighbors. They deserve your apology. Someone who is running for mayor should say that they're going to run and represent all of Peoria. That includes your unhoused neighbors. That includes the people living on the street. And it's clear tonight that this community cares about the people living here, whether they are housed or not. So, do you really want to be a person that represents all of Peoria, or do you want to be a person who represents the business owners, who, by the way, you just voted against one business owner receiving their liquor license? So, I am asking you not, because I know you don't respond during this comment. I expect to see an apology to our neighbors, not to me, to our neighbors. I demand that of you as your constituent, because that was deeply offensive.
Did we hear from Noah Palm? Okay, sorry, Noah. That was Nicholas, right? Okay. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Noah Palm, and I'm here on behalf of the Peoria chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union to express our opposition to the public camping ordinance. The National ACLU has already condemned the Supreme Court case that allowed the ordinance to be possible because it violates the 8th Amendment that protects citizens against cruel and unusual punishment. Furthermore, this was the opinion of the Supreme Court since the Robinson versus California case from 1962. I understand Greya believes that this ordinance was possible before the Grants Pass case, and that is true. However, it would be likely faced by heavy litigations by organizations like the ACLU for violating the 8th Amendment. For instance, in Boulder, Colorado in 2022, where the court ruled in favor of ACLU's stand saying it correctly alleged that the city's ordinance was cruel and unusual punishment. And that's just one example. For the following reasons, we will be condemning this ordinance tonight. First, the ordinance as drafted is cruel, criminalizing people for sleeping in public parks even though they have nowhere else to go. The penalties attached to those who violate the ordinance are especially punishing, running into the hundreds of dollars from people who are already struggling to survive and could even mean jail time. The ordinance also falls disproportionately on people of color and people with disabilities who tend to be overrepresented among those who are unhoused. Even if there wasn't fines, another concern is in that ordinance is the expansion of the power of police to search and seize people's property without a warrant. This expansion of police power that raises serious Fourth Amendment concerns. Americans treasure our right to protect ourselves and our property under the Fourth Amendment. We can all imagine how we would feel if police were allowed to simply search our homes or cars on a whim. Everyone deserves those protections, even if they are unhoused. If the goal of the ordinance is to help people in Peoria, the use of punitive fines does just the opposite. Levying fines and penalties against those who are already experiencing difficulty with finding housing only intensifies their financial insecurity, making it more, not less, likely that they are able to find permanent housing. Repeatedly fining people who are already unable to afford permanent housing simply traps them in a cycle of fines and debt that makes it all the more difficult to secure housing. Homelessness is a complex problem not only in Peoria, but across the country. Criminalizing those who find themselves in this situation will not lead to a solution. A major cause of homelessness is the lack of affordable housing. The council could address those issues rather than criminalize those who are already experiencing hardship because of the lack of such housing. As a community, we should be looking for solutions, not scapegoating those who are already struggling to find housing. We can do better than this cruel ordinance. I think Peoria residents take pride in attempting to provide an exceptional quality of life for all people in the community. As the Corporate Council reported earlier, our city has a history of doing that. However, an ordinance that criminalizes the behavior of people because they are unhoused and sleep in our public parks and other public areas flies in the face of that goal. The City Council should reject this cruel proposal. Thank you.
Kathy McNeil.
I like to get straight to the point. What I believe is that this council, this table, and all these other tables that you actually mentioned in the beginning of the meeting of what it's costing the city, if I'm correct. Organizations like Phoenix, Jolt, Lula, OSF Street Medical Outreach, Sophie's Kitchen, the Porch Pantry, Halfway Something, and Salvation Army, and the Southside Mission. I thought that there was a coalition of those organizations that somebody like those come together and talk about, well, you know, even things that are even related, such as racial equity, violence. I mean, Peoria's, okay, so you have spent a task force, funded a task force for stolen vehicles. I think that's good. So can't we have a task force for this? I mean, you're hearing a lot about don't do this. You know, I mean, we need to say what we want to do about it. And Councilman Riggenbach, I'm so excited to hear you say that you might even want to participate in something just like that. And I would guess that there's others who would also. And so, yeah, this is a table, and like someone also mentioned, there's other tables that we could get together. And I mean, sure, we need a solution as quickly as possible. Someone had mentioned about how we don't really have low-income housing, enough of that to even get started. And I want to mention, I tried to find out, Rockford, Illinois has gotten national recognition for its solutions. They have, I emailed them, I haven't got an answer. I looked on their website. Part of their solution is some stricter guidelines for landlords. I mean, I encourage you to go to their website. I'm waiting for an answer from Representative Sorensen on that. But I see that there are these people that represent these places. And, you know, if they can all be here practically at the same time, I would think that we could surely, and I don't know the Reverend here. I thought there was some church leaders that had gathered on this issue, or city leaders. There's a committee for houseless people. I don't know enough about it, but I just want to say I'm ready to get in too. I mean, as much as I don't know, I would say that it's got to be about a table like this, or maybe we're a little closer and a little friendlier. So basically, that's pretty much what I was going to say, that I had tried to find out what other cities. Madam Mayor, that was exciting to hear you say you want to approach this cautiously, and, you know, we want something practical and feasible that is compassionate. That's pretty much where I was going to go with this. Yeah, that our distinguished Supreme Court, you know, they found another segment of the population to look at the freedom that they have and give them more freedom. Yeah, let's have the freedom to criminalize homeless people. No.
Rose Farrell. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, City Council. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as an individual. I come to you today as a Peorian, born and raised, and someone who, for about half of their life, has worked with the public, including those experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity. Many public spaces here in Peoria welcome these people with open arms, but only as long as we are physically open. After our doors close and we lock up for the night, we don't know what happens to the people who used our space as refuge. And how lucky are we to be able to go home, slough off the evening within the four walls of our houses and apartment buildings? Once the hardships of the day hit us, we are enveloped in privacy. Not all of us have that luxury. No, in fact, when you are experiencing homelessness, your worst day is on full display to the public. If you take people who have already been failed by society and you poke them and shake them, they will understandably be disturbed. Perhaps they were just trying to sleep off the night that they stayed wide awake for in order to protect themselves. And if you pick at them, they may act out. Then you slap them with a fine that they cannot pay. And then what? I think we can all infer what happens next. You cannot beautify our city by being unkind. These are people who deserve to be treated with the same kindness you offer someone wearing a suit. A person's external appearance does not denote their housing status. That person dressed to the nines could be experiencing homelessness, just as that person wearing a tattered shirt could own 5 properties. You just don't know. And yes, overall, we do need to practice compassion. The people experiencing homelessness are our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, sisters, siblings, uncles, and aunties. They look just like you and me. Don't leave these people, your citizens, behind. As we move forward as a city, we must remember to uplift one another. To quote Dr. Angela Y. Davis, we must always attempt to lift as we climb. Thank you.
Lawrence Machard.
My name is Lawrence Machard, and thank you all for letting me speak. I would just want to say real quick, and it's very important, I've said it before, please consider putting the public comments at the beginning of the meeting. You have seen wonderful people that have sat through 4 hours of your business, and they have waited here patiently. And remember, you are all paid very well to be here. You consider it an honor to be here. Everyone behind me considers it an honor to be here, but they have family and job obligations. My God, we've lost people tonight, and that just shouldn't happen. You have to be inclusive. You have to be inclusive. I want to say first that I think we have a great opportunity here regarding the homeless situation, the unhoused situation. I appreciate, Madam Mayor, what you said about getting the police out of this, about getting more social services into this, about this being just the beginning, okay? The thing was that the beginning of this, the reason it's all up here is because of the Supreme Court ruling, the Donald Trump Supreme Court ruling in Grants Pass. The city couldn't do it quick enough to put in this ordinance draft, and that had punitive measures, hundreds of dollars, and jail time. I mean, my God, that is the core of what that ordinance is about, of what this ordinance is about. So thank God we've got time to talk about this. I appreciate what you said, Madam Mayor. I think that you are going at this the right way, but let's not jump into this because the Supreme Court made that ruling a couple weeks ago. You know, the Peoria police couldn't wait to sweep out encampments as soon as that passed. The night that it passed, we know that the cops went through various places and swept them and got people out. You know, they weren't waiting for an ordinance. They saw that the legality of the Supreme Court, and they took their cue from that, and they went and committed basically violence against the unsheltered people. And let's not quibble about what's going on. If we have punitive measures, if we have fines and jail time, the people that that's directed against, they will be traumatized, they have no way to pay it, and they will end up in jail. If you want to look at, everyone talks about data. It's very easy to look up the data on what happens when you take the aggressive sweeping, police sweep actions in encampments. People are traumatized. People are, you know, they lose everything. The stuff isn't saved. And they are just they're put back into the far reaches of society. A lot of people have said that, that when these things happen, the people they don't go away. They just go into the dark recesses, the darker recesses of our society, of the city of Peoria. And that is not good, not at all. But I appreciate, Madam Mayor, what you said. I know that your heart's in the right place. I applaud you for redirecting some of the intention of this ordinance. Whoever drew that up, they did not have the people of Peoria in mind.
Thank you, Mayor. As City Council members, this has been a long evening, so I will be very brief. I don't think there's anything that I could elaborate on more than the passion that you've heard behind me, but I'm here representing Home for All Continuum of Care. We are a network of providers that come together to create our strategy around addressing homelessness in our service area. And I want to extend the offer to be that bridge between the passion and the work that you're doing here tonight around this table to connect with lived expertise, to connect with our providers, to connect with all of those different institutions and systems of care as we work to effectively address this. So we don't have to turn to criminalization, and we can have a more wholehearted approach to ensuring that we are effectively addressing encampments in our community. So thank you very much, and I look forward to hopefully meeting with very many of you in the near future.
Thank you.
Good evening. Recently, I visited Denver, Colorado with my family. Denver had a pretty similar ordinance to the one being proposed today. All over the city, we saw signs reading "no sitting, no standing," and hostile architecture like divided benches or open fields with huge fences around them, warning you about fines or being arrested for laying down outside. I was there to enjoy the scenery and architecture of the city, not the homeless population, obviously. However, I can certainly say that constant signage about standing in one spot too long and hostile architecture made me feel much more uncomfortable and unwelcome in that city than seeing people sleeping on the grass. One of those things made me feel persecuted and on edge, like I was constantly being watched and judged, and the other had no effect on me at all. All of this is to say that our city's image is more adversely affected by hostility towards the vulnerable as opposed to people being able to see them. I have lived in Peoria my whole life. I love this city. I grew up here. I've gone to school here. I've done everything here. Taught to be generous, display kindness, and to help someone you see who has encountered a problem. My parents, teachers, and friends have all taught me this through their actions. And I believe that I've grown to be a better person because of it. So my instinct when I hear that people are out suffering, living on the streets without houses, is we should get them houses, not we should put them in jail. I think that if that is your first instinct, to find people and put them in jail for suffering, you need to seriously reevaluate your morals. When children see a struggling person being arrested for sleeping outside, what are they being taught as a young generation? Certainly not generosity nor kindness. They're being taught that when you see someone who has encountered a problem, you should hurt rather than help them. Our city's actions are showing them to be hostile towards the vulnerable and struggling. I, for one, don't want the youngest generation of Peoria growing up just like I have to become people in favor of hurting others. The world already has enough of those people. I ask the council to consider Peoria's image and influence on its residents before passing an ordinance that directly harms the homeless population and all of our city. Thank you.
Victoria Brown.
It's my daughter. Wasn't she lovely? My name is Victoria Brown, and I would like to address the council this evening as someone who has worked as a volunteer with Imago Dei Church, Lula, and Jolt, all organizations that have been seeking the alleviation of suffering of those who live unsheltered. I'm not entirely sure what I can add to anything else that has been said, but I do hope that the council has talked to the people that this ordinance will directly affect. They are also your constituents. I hope the information you used to create this ordinance did not only come from those who have property, images to protect, and easy means to contact you. The solution to not seeing suffering does not seem very creative, and I would like you to consider that this is a solution to not seeing suffering. It is not a solution to end homelessness or aid in any way those who are unsheltered. This ordinance seems to be written only for those who are housed. Any city could write an ordinance like this. Can't Peoria do better? Homelessness is a complex problem, and it requires a complex and creative solution. I do not see anything in this ordinance that addresses the real issues I see when I volunteer in my city. Does this ordinance consider what the real causes and consequences of being unsheltered are? These are my friends, people who have had every support taken away from them. As privileged as we all are, have we considered the number of layers of support we have around us if something goes wrong? You probably have many people, family and friends, you can call if you need something, insurance for some emergencies, and cars to get you where you need to go. How many things would have to go wrong in your life before you became unsheltered? I hope you never have to find out, and I would certainly hope you would never have to be fined or imprisoned for the lack of support you found yourself in. My friends have lost all their layers of support, and now one of their final supports, the city they call home, is turning against them. In a destitute state, does the city really think that fines will deter anyone from sleeping outside? Do you think they want to be there in the first place? I fail to see how this ordinance changes anything except to make losing your support in life a crime. I urge the council not to be like other cities. It might seem easy to pass this ordinance against seeing suffering, but it is not creative, collaborative, or comprehensive, and does nothing to address the real issues that are at play in our community. I urge the council to work with agencies that directly intersect with the unsheltered population in Peoria to be one of the cities in our nation that refuses to criminalize suffering. Of course, it won't be easy and it won't be quick, but it could be a beacon of light for how other cities could handle the suffering in their areas. Peoria could be a city that sees people for who they are, not a city that only sees someone's outward status as unsheltered. Be brave, Peoria. People are always worth our best. I ask the council, are you doing your best? Are you being brave? Thank you.
Hannah Linder.
Hello, my name is Hannah Linder. I'm in strong opposition to the public camping ordinance. As we've been hearing, there are a lot of solutions that we can explore that would have a better impact for our community. One that I want to share is that we need to expand access to rental and utility assistance programs in our community. At my job, I manage one of these rental assistance programs. On a weekly basis, I encounter people in our community who don't qualify for my program or any local program and don't have any other options. In conversations with my colleagues, they've echoed this concern. We try to guide people to the resources they do qualify for, but many people slip through the cracks and lose their homes. I hope that the council dedicates a team to investigate the scope of this issue, but it seems like more people in Peoria are facing housing insecurity than ever before. I urge you, please listen to your unhoused neighbors. Continue to work closely with local and grassroots community resources to find innovative solutions for Peoria families and individuals facing homelessness. And since we're talking about letting people stay in their homes, I have to mention Palestine. Israel has forced thousands of Palestinians away from their homes since the Nakba in 1948, and thousands more since October 7th. Many people still carry the keys to their houses decades later, no matter how many times they are displaced, and no matter how many atrocities they endure. It's time for Peoria to pass a ceasefire resolution to show our solidarity with the Palestinians against Israel's crimes against humanity. Peorians stand for justice, and from Peoria to Palestine, we stand up for our neighbors. Thank you for your attention.
Welcome. Taylor Maxfield.
Evening, neighbors, City Council. I am a resident in Peoria. I'm a neighbor and friend to many other Peoria residents, including those who are unhoused or have been formerly unhoused. I think we've heard a lot of great things today. I'm a student, forever student of becoming a better neighbor, and I think that's a journey that can help us all. We are all in this together, and I am believing more and more that there really is no they. And the more we can get that out of our vocabulary, they and them, the more good we can do as a community, as neighbors. in our city. I am advocating for the city council and all of us to consult with the Home for All Continuum of Care with United Way. Kate Green spoke today. This continuum of care is partnered with many of the nonprofits we mentioned today as well. Christina Call also spoke from Phoenix Community Development. These are major players in Peoria that have many years of experience and proximity to our neighbors. I urge us all to connect with the experts and connect with our unhoused neighbors to further address the situation and edit this ordinance greatly. I advocate strongly for a delay in, drafting and putting in a new ordinance. I'm strongly against any fines or jail time. And I also urge you in another draft of an ordinance, if that does come, to have very mandatory and specific discretion points. The ordinance right now mentions some discretion, but without a lot of knowledge of resources in the area or training on how to, handle certain situations, someone who is coming to an encampment or meeting someone who is sleeping, outside might not have that wealth of knowledge to draw from. And when they take their discretion, we don't know what that will look like. I think people really need to have a wealth of knowledge to draw from, and those mandatory discretions be in place, especially when our shelters are full, which they often are. In the winter, a couple years ago, when the encampment was moved from under the bridge, and the city partnered with Phoenix and the Continuum of Care to move people along to permanent housing. That was in the winter. There were over 20 people living under the bridge, outside. This problem doesn't go away when it's cold. Someone also said, just because we can't see people suffering doesn't mean they're not. The health issue is very great, not just when we see people sleeping outside, but when we don't. That actually should trigger an alarm for us too. That is when health equity is at risk, because those providers who go into the encampments and see our unhoused neighbors are not able to access them. Where do you think people go when it's cold? It might be an unsafe situation. It might be a place not fit for habitation. The safety and health risks don't just go away because we don't see them when we're driving home. Thank you so much for your time.
Aiden Kolb.
Hello, good evening, council, mayor. My name is Aiden. I've lived in Peoria for 21 years, born here, raised here, went to school here. I'm a student, an organizer, a harm reductionist, but most importantly, I'm a community member and neighbor who cares very deeply about the unhoused residents of Peoria, Illinois. I'm going to keep this relatively short, relatively concise in the interest of those speaking behind me. So first and foremost, as we all know, poverty as well as homelessness are not self-perpetuating, meaning that they cannot exist in and of themselves. These aforementioned issues are the result of a myriad of policy decisions made at the federal, the state, as well as the local level, such as here. From the bulldozing of the slums during the urban renewal period of 1949 to the mid-1950s, to the public-private partnership of the Hope 6 program, which dramatically decreased the availability of public housing to the lowest income residents of any given metropolitan area. Policies and decisions made at any and all levels of government have the potential to harm the most vulnerable and underserved members of any given community, members who have already been alienated and abandoned by people in power. I wholeheartedly believe that your collective ruling on this ordinance can and might drastically harm the unsheltered residents of this community. Let me be frank. Being downtrodden is not a crime and should never be treated as such. This policy proposes an arbitrary and punitive solution to a problem that arose due to past policy decisions, such as those I mentioned, and more importantly, those I did not. The number is almost incalculable. The people, and let me be frank, the people, not animals, the human beings with hopes, dreams, and desires, who will be fined and jailed if this ordinance is passed, are oftentimes victims of decisions and initiatives that were made without their individual needs, stories, and inputs in mind. These people did not wake up one day and decide to sleep outside on a whim or because they're lazy or unmotivated or any other of that bootstrap ideology that has been presented earlier today. This ordinance is cruel, unusual, and punitive by every single stretch of the definition. It is well documented that punitive methods have the ability to oftentimes defer and further exasperate issues that they were originally designed to alleviate. I believe that instead of punishing these people, we need to further support and uplift local support solutions such as public housing-oriented shelters and nonprofits, harm reduction organizations, as well as community leaders. I urge all of you to shift your focus away from the punitive methods and to instead think about the entities that already work with and are entrusted and entrenched within these communities. Once again, I urge you all to work with us and no longer work against us. Thank you.
Trendy Schaffner.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and for staying as long as you have to hear our comments. I stand before you tonight not just as the Director of Substance Use Services at Jolt Harm Reduction, but as someone who believes deeply in the inherent dignity and humanity of every person. As you consider any proposed ordinances that would criminalize homelessness and outdoor camping, I urge you to pause and reflect on the true impact that this policy would have on our community, especially on those who are often unseen and unheard, the people who sleep outside because they have nowhere else to go. At the heart of our shared humanity is a simple truth. Every person, regardless of their circumstance, is deserving of respect, compassion, and love. When we speak about experiencing homelessness, we are talking about our neighbors, our fellow human beings. These are individuals who have dreams, who have faced unimaginable challenges, and like all of us, seek safety, stability, and a sense of belonging. Laws that criminalize the very existence of a certain population are inhumane, regressive, and harken back to the darker days of our existence as a country. The Supreme Court ruling that paved the way for these types of ordinances, the Grants Pass ruling, is because of a similar ban in a place that was once a sundown town. I think that everyone here tonight should pause and ask themselves if being associated with that kind of town is the future we want for Peoria. If you're a person of Christian faith and guided by the teachings of Jesus, I challenge you to remember that Jesus consistently showed love and care for the most vulnerable among us. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells us, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." This is a powerful reminder that how we treat those who are struggling is a reflection of our own moral character. To criminalize people simply for being homeless is to turn away from the very teachings that call us to love and serve one another. To criminalize homelessness is to deny the humanity of those who have already been marginalized. It is to say that their presence, their existence, is something to be hidden away or punished. But those of us who work directly with people who will be affected by these ordinances know that this is not true. We know that every person who sleeps outside has a story, and often that story is one of incredible resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. Like the person who lost their job and couldn't afford rent, the individual fleeing domestic violence with nowhere else to turn, the veteran who served our country but now battles the invisible wounds of war, or the person who struggles with mental illness and finds themselves without support. These are not criminals. These are people who deserve our compassion, our help, and our love. We must look for solutions that honor the dignity of every person. We must ask ourselves, how can we help rather than punish? How can we lift up rather than push down? If the service providers, who you've heard from a lot of them tonight, who are doing direct care, had been asked to the table in the drafting of this ordinance, they would have shared with you a lot of the ideas that you've heard tonight. They would have told you to expand access to housing, including transitional housing programs that could ensure that service providers would still be able to find, access, and provide support to individuals experiencing homelessness. Jessica made a great point saying they'll still be homeless, we won't be able to find them, and they'll never get housed. Removing encampments makes the work harder for outreach teams like Joel Phoenix. It destables those people whose homes have been torn down and removed, setting them back even further and trying to improve their situation. They tell you to invest in supportive services, but I'd like to remind you that even those people who sleep outside have agency and should have the autonomy to decide what services they choose to engage in. If you're forcing them into services, you're not giving them a choice. It's not really a decision that they've made. They tell you to build community and connection. People experiencing homelessness often feel isolated and forgotten. Please create spaces where those people experiencing homelessness can lend their voices and their experience to help shape public policies that deal with this issue. They'd ask you to lead with compassion. As leaders, you have the power to set the tone for our community. Please don't let your table here around this horseshoe be so far removed from the people affected by your policies that you think criminalizing and punishing is the same as helping lift people out of their unfavorable circumstances. By leading with compassion.
Your time's up. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Ren Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Ren Parker, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm the VP of Communications for the Board of Directors of Peoria Proud, and I'm here to represent them tonight. It has recently come to our attention that the City Council would be discussing a new ordinance criminalizing unhoused individuals for sleeping outside and in camps in the city of Peoria. We would like to urge the City Council to consider a few things before passing any ordinances that would criminalize the unhoused population. Homelessness is a crisis that affects many individuals, but its efforts are disproportionately severe on marginalized communities, including the queer population. In Peoria, where resources and support systems for homeless individuals are already limited, criminalizing homelessness would exacerbate these challenges and disproportionately affect LGBTQ+ individuals. Members of the queer community face distinct challenges that increase their vulnerability to homelessness. Many individuals experience rejection from their families, discrimination in the workplace, and lack of access to safe and affirming housing. This can lead to a higher incidence of homelessness among queer individuals who often find themselves in precarious and unsafe situations to begin with. Criminalizing their survival through ordinances targeting activities like loitering or panhandling only worsens their situations by pushing them further into the margins of society. The Trevor Project, the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention nonprofit organizations for queer youth, released a study titled Homelessness and Housing Instability Among LGBTQ+ Youth that provides statistics about the impact of homelessness in the LGBTQ community. According to the study, 28%, nearly 1/3 of queer youth reported experiencing homelessness or housing instability in their lives, including higher rates among transgender and non-binary youth. Of those youth, 16% of LGBTQ youth reported that they slept away from their parents or caregivers because they ran away, with more than half reporting they ran away because of mistreatment or fear of mistreatment due to their identity. 14% of youth who reported they slept away from their parents or caregivers did so because they were kicked out or abandoned due to their identity. And it's not just youth who are disproportionately impacted by homelessness and housing instability. A study by the UCLA School of Law, Williams Institute, showed that of the homeless and unhoused population surveyed, 8% were transgender adults across all sexual orientations, 3% of cisgender and genderqueer sexual minority adults, and 1% of cisgender straight adults. In Peoria, the impact of such criminalization would be particularly harsh. The city's resources for supporting homeless individuals are already stretched majorly thin, with limited shelter options and social services. For queer individuals in Peoria who may already face additional barriers to accessing these services due to discrimination or lack of LGBTQ inclusive support, criminalizing homelessness would mean further entrenching them in a cycle of poverty and legal trouble. The prospect of arrest or fines for merely existing in public spaces would only deepen their isolation and hinder their ability to seek help. Instead of criminalizing homelessness, Peoria should focus on expanding access to affordable housing, increasing support services, and fostering inclusive programs that cater to the specific needs of LGBTQ plus individuals. By investing in preventative measures and supportive services, we can address the root causes of homelessness and help create a more just and equitable community. The city of Peoria has worked diligently over the past several years to become a welcoming and inclusive city for marginalized communities. We urge you to reconsider these factors and advocate for policies that support rather than penalize those who are most in need. Addressing homelessness with empathy and understanding will not only aid the queer community, but also strengthen the fabric of our city as a whole. Thank you for your attention to this crucial matter, and have a good night.
Darcy Katie.
Good evening, City Council members and Madam Mayor, Dr. Ali. Thanks for hanging in there. We're going on 5.5 hours strong.
That's all right.
So, tonight I'd like to inform all of you, along with the present community members and those watching at home, about the growing community support for the Peoria City Council to pass a ceasefire resolution, along with hopefully providing further clarity on the intersectionality of the treatment of our local houseless population versus those that are houseless in Palestine due to ongoing genocide, along with highlighting why it is our moral and ethical obligation to protect one of society's most vulnerable populations, the houseless. I believe it is both immoral and unconscionable to even consider penalizing people for sleeping outside. However, under the new ordinance, people can receive a citation and a possible fine. A key point worth noting is that if a person receives 3 violations of this ordinance within 6 months of the first one given, then there is a possibility of serving time in the county jail of up to 6 months, effectively criminalizing houselessness. I, as a longtime resident of Peoria, do not support this ordinance in its current form. This ordinance clearly does not account for the complexity of houselessness when you consider that according to SAMHSA in the United States, 21% of individuals experiencing houselessness have reported having a serious mental illness, and 16% have reported having substance use disorder, while 37% of individuals who identified as Black and 24% identifying as Hispanic comprise the houseless population in this survey, meaning 60% of people experiencing houselessness are people of color. The populations that would be most affected should this ordinance pass as it is written currently are those that face systemic racism, lack of appropriate and necessary services to support them on their mental health and substance recovery journeys, along with a host of other factors that funnel into why houselessness exists in the first place. We as a community will not effectively alleviate nor end houselessness in Peoria by criminalizing it. I ask that the council give deep consideration to how they can support local organizations that interact on a daily basis with the houseless, such as JOLT, Lula, Phoenix, Dream Center Peoria, Peoria Friendship House, just to name a few. I am grateful to see so many local community members, activists, and organizations coming out to voice their concerns about the ordinance that will impact our local houseless community, and I ask that each of you in turn consider the impact that funding from your tax dollars is having on the houseless of Palestine. Many of you in this room tonight may be unaware that approximately $1,746,400 of Peoria, Illinois taxpayer income has been sent to Israel to fund the ongoing genocide in Palestine. rather than your hard-earned money going to fund the destruction of 85% of the buildings in Gaza and 90% of the population being displaced and effectively houseless, why not support using these funds from the figure I gave just moments ago to support and fund 19 local elementary school teachers or 207 local public housing units for 1 year? We have so much to offer our community if only we, the people, would choose to take a stand against funding a genocide. If you do not want increased houselessness in Peoria, Illinois, and would rather support our houseless friends and family for them to hopefully have a more stable quality of life in the future, then why on earth would you support and fund the creation of houselessness en masse in Palestine? If the targeting and criminalization of houselessness locally feels morally and ethically wrong to you, then please do not support it happening anywhere else. We as a community must continue to come together to create the change we wish to see in this world. So please keep showing up like you have tonight. And please join us in supporting a ceasefire resolution. Thank you.
Justin Luba.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a constituent of Councilman Graham, who's a landlord and a resident of an apartment in a property managed by Councilman Euler. Before I begin my comments, I just wanted to note the irony of the proposal draft's most vocal supporters themselves receiving passive income from surplus properties. The proposal draft on responses to camping at public property is what happens when we are conditioned to casually and habitually dehumanize each other. Systematically responding to vulnerability with carcerality, in addition to being violent and ineffective, shows that those who promote this practice do not see the people it would directly impact as human beings or worthy of care. A thriving community requires resources and support, not a punitive reaction to vulnerability. In the United States and in Peoria, we are continuously asked to dehumanize each other in order to rationalize our existence in a society that works to destroy some people's opportunities to lead livable lives. Whether they are destroyed by the socioeconomic conditions created by policy choices in Peoria or destroyed by the American military complex as it is unleashed on people in Gaza. The imperative to casually dehumanize is so pervasive, and the horrors that it makes possible so wide-ranging and inhumane that it demands a constant and conscientious effort to work against it. I want to thank those council members who emphasize the need to avoid criminalizing our unhoused community members and the need to center services and resources over punishment and state violence. This proposal draft is absolutely an example of a policy designed to elevate state violence. This is not how we build a survivable world for each other. And to speak directly to Chuck, as your constituent who has never received a callback, despite many attempts to reach out, he can't even look at me as I'm speaking to him now. Interesting. That was quite the tantrum. The theatrics and childish grandstanding make your input on this issue impossible to take seriously and demonstrate your callousness to human suffering, as well as a damning lack of basic sociological literacy. Your comments tonight will haunt you in all of your future political endeavors. You lead with rage and disgust instead of love, and it makes you weak. You owe the unhoused community an apology, and you need to humble yourself. There are many people who spoke more powerfully and intelligently than I can on this topic. I would only urge all members of the council to vote and speak on these issues in a way that explicitly affirms the humanity of all of our community members. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council.
Jet Baker.
Yeah, Alan was after my heart, mentioning how, speaking of young Black professionals, there's nowhere you can go, and I feel sad that there's no place to mention. I live closer to the Empire Lounge than Northwoods Mall is, so right around the corner is within walking distance. I would love to see a space like that. I would love to see a space like Highly Flavored supported in our community. Back to what are you questioning, I think is a really great way to frame either of these issues. But want to join the folks up before saying ceasefire now. The silence is violence. Good afternoon, evening now, friends, comrades, allies, co-conspirators in the building and online, including those who didn't get to speak. I know a few who didn't get a card or had to leave early. And hello, Peoria City Council members, we see you. We see those of you who at your earliest opportunity are doing what you can to criminalize people without shelter, based on the ruling of an extreme right-wing Supreme Court, which has been enlisted, bought, and paid for by Donald Trump and MAGA loyalists. The background provided by the city imprint, which directly references the case in Oregon in the first line, highlights the paternalism of this idea, and it illustrates the reverse logic used on civil rights, which ignores the designation of protected class and is using police to enforce an ideal of society that benefits, as Graham mentioned, a business class as opposed to the people they will be locking up. And as Bernice Young pointed out, Gordon Young, pointed out, sometimes hours after they're released. So that's 2, right? 2 strikes out of 3. Just as well, it shows an insistence on naming and prioritizing this issue as a public nuisance over these folks' lives, the public's health and safety. It also shows a commitment by the city to spend money on homelessness, but in a carceral manner. I wonder how many police officers were told that so much of their time, speaking of police, so much of their time would be spent ejecting people without shelter from public property and pulling them into a cycle of criminality by taking their things, uprooting their lives, giving them a criminal record for existing. How much money will be spent on incarcerating folks, getting them representation, uprooting them, apprehending them? Will there be a task force in the interest of this issue? Takes weeks to address these encampments, right? How much overtime will be allotted for this issue? Does this have the support of the police, the county? As this person mentioned, Vespa. That money could be more tangibly and more ethically spent helping people who are our neighbors. This ordinance outlines no plan outside of criminalization and the storage of items, which after 6 months in jail, they'll be gone, right? The mayor alluded to not doing this until we were ready. We could go on and on about solutions, but this is not one of them. To the person who likened these folks to animals 3 times over, I think you shared a few facts we could all agree on. Oftentimes, people without shelter have lower life expectancy, and we should help them, not send them to jail. I think many of us would agree jail time and fines are punitive. Jail time and fines don't help people without shelter to find permanent housing solutions. Apathy is not the reality here. You were saying nobody wants to hurt people. We want to help them. This doesn't help people.
Your time's up.
Thank you.
Terry Brink.
Hi, I'm a resident of Lynn Street for the past 25 years. Before that, I lived across from White School. And before that, I was a live-in volunteer at an emergency shelter on Saratoga. During that time, I've been proud of the city council sometimes. And unfortunately, tonight is not a night that I am proud of the city council. This ordinance is so cruel. As people have said, some people have said before, it seems like some people on the city council could not wait to follow the Supreme Court, which is cruel and mean and does not represent most of the people in Peoria, Illinois. One should not. During this time, I've also noticed that the amount of people who have no homes and are living on the street has vastly increased since the 90s. Last year, I had several people, one person in particular, occupying the outside of an abandoned house. And when I found out that the police had arrested him, I was very sad. This man needed help, mental help, help with substance abuse. He did not deserve to be arrested for something he could not help. I really applaud the mayor and other people for not supporting this ordinance and being part of committees and organizations that are trying to humanely end the unhoused situation of people. Please do not pass this ordinance which criminalizes being unhoused. If anything, we need an ordinance that says how we are going to help people get housing and the mental health treatment and the substance abuse treatment and other treatments and job training that they need. Don't put them in jail. It doesn't help anything. And people who are in house cannot afford fines. And to say, well, you can do community service, you're making people work for free. That is a punishment. And it's just, I'm so proud of all these people who are against this ordinance, and please do not consider passing it until it is completely overhauled. Thank you.
Douglas Stacy. Douglas, you are our last speaker.
Hi, my name is Douglas Stacy. I work for Jolt Harm Reduction. I'm in direct care with, people that are unhoused, and also people with mental health issues and substance use issues. There's a lot of gaps in care, if anything, you guys should be focusing on mental health and detox, because I can't get nobody into treatment because there's no beds at detox. I want to reintroduce myself again. 15 months ago, I was a junkie. I was a needle junkie. That's what a lot of people call it, but I was just abusing substances. That's the reality of it. Once I got past that, I figured out that I had a voice. A voice that's powerful enough to bring people back from addiction, whatever y'all call it, substance use disorder. I probably worked with 100 people now in the last year and 3 months since I've been sober. I've seen so many gaps in care and so many people turned away at treatment. Like that's a good place to start. That's a good place to start. Because if you're sober, you can think about the things that you need to do. And there's other organizations like Oxford Houses. I went into an Oxford House for 6 months after treatment. I got right with the courts. Let me elaborate a little bit more on that. I was on probation for a burglary that I didn't commit, technically, but I pled guilty because they told me to. It would let me walk free that day if I pled guilty. There's no advocacy out here for people on the streets. If you don't know anything about anything, when it comes to the court system, they're just going to run you through the system. They're just going to public defender, give them some time. Then you guys are getting paid for the days that we sit in jail. That $30,000 that was spent, 30-something thousand on cleaning up the city, 12,000 of that was me and my people. A good majority of those people are housed and sober now. And so I would like to apologize to you guys for that. I lived in the woods behind a landmark. I didn't really care about a voice or being able to tell people, what's missing. I think if there was more money spent on the homeless care, aftercare from treatment, and mental health, man, because if you got mental health issues, I got mental health issues. I'm ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenic, manic depressive, PTSD. Plus, on top of that, I was using methamphetamine and heroin and cocaine. Those were my go-tos when they cut me off Adderall because I left the state of Indiana. And I came over here to try to get medical care, and I couldn't get on Adderall because, I don't know, something about insurance. And so I ended up going to meth, and my life spiraled from there, you know. I've been here 8 years, and I have overcame a huge meth addiction, a huge cocaine addiction, and a huge heroin addiction. Conquered every single one of them. Conquered them. I conquered every single one of those substances and lifestyle too. I was living in the woods. I was homeless. I was shitting in stairwells. I apologize for my language. You take a hit of crack, you got to use the bathroom. And to use your bathroom in your pants is kind of embarrassing. I'm one voice. There are many people out there like me that if they were given a chance to fix their life, they would. And so I'm grateful to Joel, to Lula, to every organization that you heard tonight. Because every single one of those organizations, I've been housed by Phoenix because of frostbite on my toes. They housed me for a couple years, you know, but my addiction got me kicked out. There needs to be a bridge between addiction, housing, mental health, that's universal, that everybody can use. There needs to be something like that out there. Focus on that instead of this.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone that spoke tonight.